Okay, so The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug is a little less than a month away. But before that, I can't review that movie without first talking about The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. So without further ado, here's The Fellowship of the Ring. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Warning, I'm going to be talking about this movie in depth with all of the spoilers, just like I'm going to do with my other Lord of the Rings reviews. I'm not going to be able to cover everything, seeing as how just the theatrical cuts of each of these movies is at least 3 hours long. But still, I'm going to do my best. So The Lord of the Rings is based off the books by J.R.R. Tolkien, and it's directed by Peter Jackson, who'd never really handled an epic of this type of scope before. Which is a miracle about how these movies got made, just the blind faith that you'd have to go through to trust this little known director. And it's just a miracle that all of this paid off. So anyways, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, it starts off and you get a little recap of everything that you need to know for this movie. Basically, you have Sauron, who's like the big bad guy of Middle-earth, and he made this ring. In the ring, he poured all of his malice, his cruelty, and it basically makes him unstoppable. So a long time ago, this big war happens and Sauron gets defeated. He loses the ring to Isildur, who's the son of the king. Through a series of unfortunate events and a bunch of other stuff that's going to happen, mainly in The Hobbit, the ring ends up in the hands of Bilbo Baggins, where it's been for the last 60 years. And at the start of this movie, you get to see the life of a hobbit. You know, they're all living in the Shire, which the Shire is one of the coolest places ever put to film. Like, you go into that place and it is literally perfect. The Hobbit's lifestyle basically just consists of drinking, smoking, and having a good time, while also just being around all this beautiful scenery. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, does it? But then finally Bilbo leaves the Shire, he's out looking for adventure. He finally lets go of the ring and it lands in the hands of his nephew Frodo. And then the wizard Gandalf tells Frodo that Sauron is back and he's gaining power and he is out looking for that ring. And that if he finds this ring, that it's not going to be looking too good for Middle-earth. So Gandalf tells Frodo, look, go take this ring to the elves in Rivendell, we'll figure out what to do with it from there. And from there, Frodo grabs his best friends Samwise and Merry and Pippin, and they go off on this adventure. And from there we have a fantasy classic that every nerd has dreamed about at some point in their life. First of all, the cast all around in this movie is amazing. I think Elijah Wood just kills it as Frodo. I mean, at the start of this movie, he's just like a normal hobbit. He's so happy and gleeful. And then you see the power of the ring and what it's doing with him throughout the movie, and it's really just weighing on him, and especially in the other two movies also. You just get the sense that this ring is just this overbearing burden that's really pulling Frodo down. And he does a great job at illustrating that. Ian McKellen, who's also great as Gandalf. You also have Sean Bean, Viggo Mortensen, John Rhys-Davies, Orlando Bloom in what I'm pretty sure was his first role. And you've got Rudy himself, Sean Astin, playing Samwise Gamgee. Just the dynamic in the relationship between Frodo and Sam in this movie, and the other ones in particular, is really what carries these movies for me. Their story is the entire emotional core of The Lord of the Rings. Just the friendship and the camaraderie that these guys have. I mean, it'll bring a tear to your eye at one point during this series. At least it should. If it didn't, you were probably raised by wolves in Siberia. Just saying. All the while, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, they are all being pursued by the Nazgul. And these guys have also been corrupted by the power of the ring, and now they work for Sauron. They're out looking for the ring, and they'll kill anyone in their path, including the ring bearer. And later they go to this one pub, and they meet this ranger named Strider. You don't really know much about him, but he's this really cool, mysterious character. Apparently he's friends with Gandalf, and Gandalf's kind of gone on his different thing right now. So Strider helps escort the hobbits to Rivendell because, let's face it, they kind of need it. Like, you can tell that the hobbits are not used to this big world that they were thrust into. They're used to just being comfortable in the Shire. The scene on Weathertop when Frodo's trying to sleep and he wakes up and Sam, Merry, Pippin, they're all up cooking food. Their fire is making this big smokestack. You know, the smell of their food will probably bring some unwanted visitors. And they do, and what happens because of that error, Frodo gets stabbed. But eventually they're able to make it, Frodo lives, and now they're in Rivendell trying to figure out what to do with this ring. And Elrond, who's basically like the master of Rivendell, he's saying, okay, this thing has to do with all the races of Middle-earth. We gotta bring people from every corner of the earth to figure out what to do with this ring. And so from there you can see the diversity of the people of Middle-earth. You see the elves, you see the dwarves, you see some humans there. And through a bunch of quarreling, they're like, okay, there's only one thing we can do with this ring. Basically, we're gonna have to take this ring up to Mount Doom, where it was created, and destroy it, because that's the only place it can be destroyed. And then this is a really cool scene right here. They're all trying to figure out what to do with the ring. And then Frodo's looking at the ring, and you can see everyone else's reflection in there, and the ring's doing its ring thing. You know, it's making those little sounds where you can tell it's probably talking to Frodo. And then Frodo stands up in the midst of all this fighting, and he says, I will take the ring to Mordor. And from there, we have the entire fellowship formed right there. You got Frodo, you have Sam, Merry, Pippin, Gandalf, Strider, who turns out to be Aragorn, the long-lost king of Gondor. You have Gimli the dwarf, Legolas the elf, and then you have Boromir, the steward of Gondor. And from there, their entire mission revolves around taking Frodo to Mount Doom to get this thing destroyed and save Middle-earth. Now, just the direction of this whole movie is just so big. I mean, there was really no movie before this that had this kind of scope before. Like that first shot of the Fellowship where they're all just coming over that mountain and you have the epic music just blaring. I'm pretty sure when people first saw that scene in theaters, they were all just sitting there like... Yeah, it was something like that. And what I think is unique about the Fellowship is that they're all really diverse people. I mean, just looking at them, you can tell that they're all different. They come from different walks of life. They all have different things that they can offer to the Fellowship, and they bring all of that to the table. You have funny banter between Gimli and Legolas because elves and dwarves, they have this history where they don't really like each other. Can't wait to see more of that in the Desolation of Smaug. That's going to be cool. And another part of this movie that's just really great is Howard Shore's score that he puts to this movie. I already highlighted the scene where they're all going over the mountain, but like when the movie first starts and they're all in the Shire, that song is just perfect. I really can't think of another word to describe that song other than perfect, to be honest. And then after they face the Balrog and Gandalf ends up falling and they think he's dead, the music that plays during that scene, they use it in the Man of Steel teaser trailer. But it's just that scene, you're just like, oh man, they just lost one of their friends, didn't they? Which is another thing. This company isn't called the Fellowship of the Ring for nothing. These people knit just such a tight friendship with each other. Like Elrond tells them, okay, you guys are not bound by any law. No one is telling you that you have to go with Frodo to the death. But they do, just because of the friendship that they've grown with each other. The action in this movie is also top-notch. Bob Anderson helped do all the swordplay with this. And you can tell everyone was just on their A-game. I mean, the Weathertop scene, you got the scene in the cave with the cave troll. The end fight in this movie was great as well. Just everyone was at top-notch performance for this entire movie. And this movie also does a really good job at just illustrating the damage that the ring can do to people. I mean, look at Boromir, for example. They illustrate more on this in the Two Towers, but back at his home, he was like the White Knight, the shining example of hope. And this movie shows that the ring can even corrupt the best of men. I mean, Boromir loses his mind to this ring, he tries to kill Frodo for it. He comes around in the end, which is awesome to see. I mean, he's up there fighting with all the Uruk-hai, and then one of them shoots him with a bow right into the chest. You can tell he's down for a second, but then right after that, he's back up swinging. He does that a couple times. I think it took him like 4 arrows to get Boromir down. That was awesome, and it just shows again how much this Fellowship just loves each other. There's a lot of fantasy movies out there, a lot of them have really good action in it, but Lord of the Rings just brings the heart to it also. Like I said, the relationship between Frodo and Sam really just carries it. That end scene when Frodo is going off in that boat and Sam just starts swimming after him. He starts drowning, but he's still swimming out to Frodo, and then Frodo just goes down there and picks him up. Once he gets in the boat, he's soaking wet, he's a little teary-eyed, and he tells Frodo the promise he made. He just goes, I made a promise, Mr. Frodo, a promise. Don't you leave from Samwise Gamgee, and I don't mean to. When you see that scene, it's just so heartwarming, and the music's playing behind it, and I'm just like, oh, it's the Hobbits, and Sam, and Frodo, and Lord of the Rings! These videos are basically just going to give me the chance to go full nerd about everything. In the end, the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring just nailed everything perfectly. It's the perfect setup for a great trilogy. And I'm of course going to give the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, an A+. So who's your favorite character in the Lord of the Rings trilogy? I'm very curious about that. Not the Hobbit quite just yet. We're going to give the Lord of the Rings its own question. So comment down below, let me know what that is. And thanks for watching this video. If you guys like it, then you can click here to see more.